Quin Snyder has stepped down as the Utah Jazz's head coach, and their superstar Donovan Mitchell was, quote, unnerved and a bit unsettled about what that means for the future of the Utah Jazz franchise. Matt, I got a very simple question for you. What does this all mean for Donovan Mitchell and his future in Utah with the Jazz?
I mean, as far as Donovan Mitchell goes, I know there's a lot of talk, especially because Donovan Mitchell is the biggest superstar that is somewhat unhappy with his situation. So obviously everybody's going to talk about him going somewhere else, especially when you're in a small market like Utah.
Yeah.
But this overall, I don't think it affects Mitchell as far as him demanding to leave, especially because I think Utah is going to be smart. They're not going to give up on their superstar who has been playing unbelievable since he stepped into Salt Lake City and became a Jazz player. He's been dominating. He's doing stuff that only Allen Iverson has done. So they're going to keep him, and then he's going to be a pivotal piece in the hiring process. I think they're going to go somewhat of the route that, you look at like the Milwaukee Bucks when they were hiring their new coach after getting rid of Jason Kidd, who Giannis Antetokounmpo really liked. Giannis was a big part of that hiring process. He got to sit down and talk with Budenholzer before they hired him. I think Mitchell will have that same sort of power and say in the hiring process. So they'll bring in a guy that Mitchell likes, and then they're going to try and refit and retool this Jazz team that has been to the playoffs multiple times since Mitchell came to the team. And so I think they'll redo that and build around Mitchell moving forward. They're going to keep him there. And not to mention, Dwayne Wade is a part of that ownership group. He's not going to let a guy like Mitchell go. I don't think you can be an owner and be a guy like Dwayne Wade who knows the game as well as he knows it and let a player like Donovan Mitchell leave your team.
Yeah, I get that. But I think this writing has been on the wall for a little while now. The resigning of Quin Snyder did not come as a surprise to me. As you know, just a few weeks ago when we were talking through the first round of the Western Conference playoffs, I said then that the Utah Jazz, before they fell in 6 games to Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks, that Jazz core looked like a core ready to be broken up from coach, from the dynamic between Rudy Gobert, and Donovan Mitchell. It just hasn't been the same since 2020. To be completely honest, before the NBA broke off into the bubble, and we've been seeing it manifest itself. I think there's been multiple stats of the lack of just pure passes from Donovan Mitchell to Rudy Gobert in game, which I think just speaks to, the level of how that relationship is just disintegrated right before our very eyes. So this is not surprising to me. And to be honest, before I go even further, I want to remind people, because you did a good job, but I want to really push home the idea and remind people of who Donovan Mitchell really is. This is somebody who stepped in the NBA as a 21-year-old rookie, started 71 games, averaged 20 points per game. This is somebody who each of the 5 years he's been in the NBA has averaged at least 20 points per game. This is somebody who dropped 57 points in a playoff game. So this is a legit star, depending on how you want to categorize it, maybe a superstar, a bona fide superstar, someone who can lead a franchise to the promised land. That remains to be seen. But as far as Donovan Mitchell and his future, it's done in Utah. I think he'll be elsewhere. Obviously, Donovan Mitchell is from New York. He has reportedly wanted to, or he wouldn't be opposed to playing for the New York Knicks, but he also reportedly isn't a fan of Knicks owner James Dolan, which isn't a surprise. Who is? Quite literally, who is? But you know who I think he might be a fan of in the ownership of an NBA franchise? I think that might be Pat Riley. And I think the Miami Heat might be the spot for Donovan Mitchell following his days in Salt Lake City. And obviously Tyler Hero has reportedly come out recently and said that he wants to be a starter. He's done being, the sixth man. He wants to be a starter. How about sending him to Utah to give him that opportunity to do that? You just signed Duncan Robinson to a 5-year, $90 million extension this offseason. That's money that can be used to kind of supplement Donovan Mitchell's large contract, even throwing in Max Strus and another, filler, a pick or two. That's what I see. I think Donovan Mitchell is done in Utah. I think he ends up in Miami with Pat Riley, with Eric Spoelstra, alongside Jimmy Butler, because if the Eastern Conference Finals taught us anything, is that Jimmy Butler needs some damn help. Yeah, he needs just a little bit more help. And again, bringing in somebody like Donovan Mitchell, who is a legit scorer in this league, somebody who has done it in the playoffs as well, I think Miami's the perfect spot for that, for him, excuse me. What do you think about that, though?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you didn't go too hard on that Knicks thing, because I was going to have to start calling you Stephen A. But the Heat they always seem to be up for
Right.
grabs when there's a superstar available, whether it's James Harden, Ben Simmons, name whoever. They were in talks to go get that guy. And I don't doubt that Pat Riley has the NBA exec power to make something like that happen, because the guy is arguably the GOAT as far as building teams. So I do understand that, but at the end of the day, here's the thing. I still think that as long as Donovan Mitchell is willing to come back to Utah, and that's going to be the whole thing. If he decided he's gone, then everything I'm saying is kind of a moot point, and he's gone. But if he is still willing to come back and be in Utah because he likes the city, he likes the organization, he likes the people within it, get rid of Gobert, rebuild. He's still young enough. He's only 26 going on 27.
Right.
You can completely retool and refit this Utah Jazz team and go a different route and still be a playoff contender. Get rid of Gobert. Get rid of some of these other aging stars like they already have started to do, and retool this team around Mitchell. And I think that's why Utah is still going to be the front runner to keep him. And also, let's be honest here, he still has 4 years on his contract. So the fact that we're talking about this is kind of crazy, because the only reason it actually happens is if Mitchell says, I want out, I need to be traded.
Which
and
is something we've seen from some
And we
superstars
have seen it. It's going to be
recently.
interesting to see if Mitchell is that kind of player, though, and he's going to do that. Wait and see how this coaching hiring process goes. And then we could talk about Mitchell leaving, because as long as Mitchell has a say and he can bring in a guy that he likes, that he thinks has not only his but the team's best interests at heart, that's going to show it. And also, as far as you talked about it, yes, this was a team that looked like they were going to blow up if they didn't reach the Western Conference Finals. But this is a move that you see a lot of times in the NBA in particular, is successful teams with good coaches, they just part ways because they haven't been able to get over that hump. And I think Mitchell realizes that. I think he'd be willing to stay with Utah if they completely show that they're fully invested in him.
And that's the thing, though, because, and you mentioned it there at the end nearly, Quin Snyder isn't a bad coach.
No, he's not a bad coach.
He's actually a very good,
he's a great
very
coach.
well-respected coach. And I don't think you can point to him as necessarily the problem of why the Utah Jazz have fallen short in the last few years. But you have to think Donovan Mitchell is surveying the landscape. He's been in Salt Lake City the last 5 years. He's been to the playoffs. He's had playoff collapses, not him personally, but as a team. I mean, just a couple years ago, them blowing, what was it, a 3-1 lead to the Los Angeles Clippers?
Yeah.
I mean, that stuff sticks with you. And again, having a teammate that you may not be, too keen on, who just got paid $200 million last offseason. Again, I just think that Donovan Mitchell has bought his time. He spent enough time in Salt Lake City. He could have jumped ship a year or two ago, but he kind of stayed with it. And I think he's seen enough of Salt Lake. I think he's on to new and greener pastures. Maybe some in South Beach. That's what I'm thinking. But let us know in the comments. Should Donovan Mitchell stay in Salt Lake City with Utah Jazz, or should he be elsewhere? And if so, where should that be? Should it be New York? Should it be Miami? Or elsewhere? Let us know something. But that's going to do it for us. For Scott Proctor, my guy Matt Morris right here. We'll catch you on tomorrow's episode of Simple Questions.